Hello, everybody. Random Observer here, and a Happy New Year to all. Apologies, it's been a while, but obviously it's been the holidays, and hope you all had a good Christmas and New Year. Anyway, thing I want to talk about today is just the idea of ad hominem, or to the person, as it would be in Latin, because the thing is that I notice in a lot of these cases where a candidate that people didn't want won or people have been surprised time and time again because they didn't respect their opponent. Now, the two most obvious example of this, shall I say, the two most obvious examples of this, there's Donald Trump. His victory in 2016 was a complete shock to his opponents because, as one supporter has said, to quote, his opponents took him literally, but they didn't take him seriously, whereas his supporters took him seriously, but they didn't take him literally. Anyway, at the other side of the spectrum, on the far left, there was the leader of the opposition. He became the leader of the opposition. A candidate called Jeremy Corbyn, on this side of the pond, became the leader of the opposition, much to the shock of the conservative press over here. And again, it's strange, although they are completely different candidates and on completely different sides of the political spectrum, the exact same thing happened. Everybody not only underestimated them, but basically did not respect them. That was the problem. Now, to be clear, okay, in the case of Donald Trump, I know that he is not a nice person. On a personal note, I personally believe, obviously, with all the allegations that have been made against him, his reputation for ruthlessness, his reputation for being extremely tough businessman, etc. He is not not, and obviously the affairs, etc., etc. Therefore, in summary, I don't believe he's a very nice person. However, what we all should be aware of is that, let's face it, he has been a CEO even before his presidency, of course. He has worked the media for many decades. He became a reality TV star for The Apprentice and also for WrestleMania. I believe he was a Hall of Famer as well. So, in other words, he knew what he was doing, and his opponents, really should have done their homework. In the corporate world, you don't just look at an opponent and think, oh, well, they're a total douchebag or they're a total whatever. You think, okay, right, what have they achieved? What have they done so far up to this point? You may not like them personally. They're not here to be liked. They're here to get a job and do a job, fulfill an agenda, etc. So you've really got to size up your opponent properly. Everybody knows that in the corporate world, but clearly in the political sphere, the opponents of Donald Trump, but also Jeremy Corbyn, didn't do this. When Trump announced he was running for presidency, a lot of people took that as a joke. They really shouldn't have done. Because, like I said, his reputation for ruthlessness, this is the same guy, as Michael Moore said, this is the same guy who tricked him, who entrapped him basically into appearing on the same television show at one point. And bear in mind, Michael Moore is quite wily himself. So if Trump could trick him, you get the idea. This is the level of cunning that he has. So in other words, do not mess with him. The same now for Jeremy Corbyn, again, the same thing on the other side of the political spectrum. When it was announced that he was running for the candidacy, of course, well, when it was announced that he was being put forward for the leader of the Labour Party on the left, the conservative press went into meltdown. They basically just said, but what they did wrong, they vitriolically attacked him, but the problem was they attacked ad hominem, the person. They just basically, instead of just looking at his policies, which were quite openly far left, I would say, definitely leftist socialist sort of policies, they didn't just say, well, we believe his policies are wrong because this and this. No, what they did, exactly what Trump's opponents did, was they just said, this guy's a complete douchebag. You don't want to vote for him. In Trump's case, they just said this guy's a complete charlatan, etc., etc. They didn't actually look at his policies and contradict them, and actually they weren't objective, basically. And the same goes in Corbyn's case. They just said, this guy's a far left neo-Marxist, etc., etc. And you don't want to vote for him, blah, 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 blah. Personal attack. They attacked him personally, which of course just made him even more popular among his supporters, and it made him look like the underdog, of course, and the martyr. In both cases, both of these candidates just looked like underdogs, the anti-hero fighting the establishment, because the establishment clearly hated them. So, of course, that just gave me more support, as Corbyn himself pointed out during a speech. Now, there was one conservative newspaper, I think it was the Daily Mail, wrote, as he said, a 14-page article attacking his party, and that just backfired because their vote increased by 10%. So he just said, yes, please write more insulting articles about us, because, of course, the more the press attack a candidate personally, the more they look desperate and out of touch. As Trump said in his case, he honed in on this. There was a press conference, apparently, where the reporters were on a raised platform above everyone else, and he just pointed to them and said, these people here, they hate me and they hate you. And that, again, it looked very true, because they were literally looking down on everyone else. And they had made some judgments. Again, all the Trump supporters have been demonized. Corbyn supporters, again, they were also demonized. They were just basically passed off as extreme or ignorant or whatever. But what their opponents did not do was actually look at what they were supporting and why they were supporting it. As Barack Obama, again, people say, oh, well, Trump supporters are, extreme right, far right, whatever. But okay, how come so many people who look like me voted for Barack Obama? Now, ask yourself that. And the reason was very simple, because he treated voters as voters. He did not appear to make judgments on people. He did not do what President Biden has said and said, Trump Republicans are the bad guys, blah, 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 blah. This group over here. No, his language, his rhetoric, he said there are no red states or blue states, there are United States. His language was one of unity, and he treated people, or appeared to treat people, with respect. He respected his opponents as much as his allies. And that is why so many people voted for him, I submit. Now, history is full of examples of people who have been underestimated. For example, Napoleon III. We did this in history class. When he stood up to give his inauguration speech in France, he was laughed out of the room. Everybody laughed at him because he was this short-looking, overweight-looking guy who spoke with a foreign accent, because he'd been brought up in Germany until that point. So his fellow politicians laughed him out of the room. They didn't take him seriously, and they really should have done, because let's face it, this was Napoleon Bonaparte's nephew. So they should have twigged that this guy knew more than he was letting on. And sure enough, I believe it was 1852, he enacted a full-scale military coup, and they did not know what hit them. Now, of course, they shouldn't really have done that, but again, they did not take their opponent seriously. That was the crux of it. If they had done, then maybe they could have prevented that. And again, another example in history, in the time of the British Empire, the leader of the Zulu nation, when they attacked in Africa, they seriously underestimated their opponent. Now, of course, as we know, the imperialists had very racist views and did not respect the Africans at the time. They really should not have had those views. As we know, those views were wrong. But the crux of it was, again, they did not respect their opponent for whatever reason, and of course suffered one of the worst defeats in the empire's history. Because, of course, they should have realized they were dealing with a warlord who, let's face it, had butchered thousands of his own people to become leader. So this man was very ruthless, and they really should have respected him more, good or bad. Anyway, and if you don't believe any of this, well, let's remember the classic fable the hare and the tortoise. You know, as we may have you may have remember from childhood, we were all told this story. The hare and the tortoise were having a race, and the hare, of course, saw that the tortoise was slow, and he thought, well, this guy's so slow, I don't even have to bother trying. So, of course, instead of running the race, he decided to take a nap. And of course, he was then awoken by the sound of a crowd cheering. What were they cheering? Well, the tortoise, all the while the hare had been asleep, the tortoise was edging his way towards the finish line. And by the time the hare realized and ran to the finish line, too late, the tortoise was over it. So again, yes, the moral is do not underestimate your opponent, no matter how slow or ignorant or unpopular they may seem. You know, they have a lot going for them. You know, if you disrespect them, you lose. Again, there's countless examples. I could go on all day for examples. It's the guys sitting quietly at the back of the room. You can see this throughout history. Example, Chinese Communist Party in the 1930s or 40s. There is an excellent photograph of all the leaders, and the guy sitting quietly at the back of the room, a certain Mao Zedong. The rest is history. Anyway, I could go on and on, but you get the idea. So ad hominem, when you attack your opponent personally, you know, you can hate your opponent, you can fight your opponent, but always respect them. That's what I learned. One guy told me this many years ago when I was younger, and he was absolutely right. So anyway, respect your opponent is the message. Happy New Year once again, everyone, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.